I stared at my boarding pass for the third time, double-checking the seat number as if it might have changed in the last 30 seconds. 14A window seat. 14 hours to Sydney. 14 hours to run away from everything I'd been avoiding for the past 5 years. If this story resonates with you, drop a heart in the comments below. The Denver airport buzzed around me with that familiar pre-flight energy, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching someone else's life through thick glass. My phone buzzed with another text from my mom asking when I'd be bringing someone home for dinner, when I'd settle down, when I'd give her grandchildren. The same questions that had been eating at me for months, the same expectations that made my chest tighten every time I thought about going home for the holidays. I'd booked this work trip to Australia partly because the project genuinely needed my attention, but mostly because I needed to be somewhere my family couldn't reach me with their concerned phone calls and not-so-subtle hints about marriage and normalcy. At 28, I was apparently running out of time to figure out my life, according to them. If only they knew the real reason I kept avoiding their setups with nice girls from church. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, and I shuffled forward with the other passengers, my carry-on feeling heavier than it should. I'd packed light, hoping somehow that would make this trip feel less like an escape and more like a legitimate business decision. But as I handed my boarding pass to the flight attendant, her professional smile felt like a spotlight on my guilt. Walking down the narrow aisle, I found row 14 and slid into the window seat, immediately pulling out my laptop to create a barrier between myself and whoever would be sitting next to me. The last thing I needed was 14 hours of small talk with a stranger when I could barely handle the conversations in my own head. I was halfway through opening my email when someone stopped beside my row. "Excuse me, I think I'm in 14B. I looked up and felt my breath catch. The man standing in the aisle was exactly the kind of guy I'd trained myself not to notice. Tall, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and eyes that seemed to see right through the careful walls I'd built around myself. He had the kind of easy confidence I'd always envied. The way he held himself suggesting he was comfortable in his own skin in ways I'd never been. Of course, I managed, standing awkwardly to let him pass. Our bodies brushed slightly as he moved past me, and I felt that familiar jolt of awareness that I'd been pushing down for years. He settled into his seat with practiced efficiency, stowing his bag and adjusting his seatbelt, and I tried to focus on my laptop screen instead of the way his hands moved or the subtle cologne that made me want to lean closer. This was exactly what I didn't need. 14 hours sitting next to someone who would make it impossible to ignore the thoughts I'd been running from. "I know this sounds completely crazy," he said suddenly, turning to face me with an expression that was part nervous, part amazed. "But I've dreamed about you." I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how that sounds," he continued, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that was both endearing and distracting. "I'm not some creep, I promise. It's just, I've been having these dreams for months now, and you were in them. Your face, exactly as you are right now. I never believed in anything like that, but seeing you here..." He shook his head, looking as bewildered as I felt. My rational mind immediately went into overdrive, cataloging all the reasons this was impossible, all the ways this could be some elaborate pickup line or coincidence. But there was something in his eyes, a genuine confusion and wonder that made it hard to dismiss entirely. "That's..." I started, then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. Impossible? Ridiculous? Terrifying in ways I couldn't even begin to process? "I'm Kyle, by the way," he said, extending his hand with a slightly embarrassed smile. "And I realize I've probably just guaranteed that you're going to request a seat change." I stared at his outstretched hand for a moment before taking it, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "Noah," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "And I don't know what to say about the dream thing." "Honestly, neither do I," Kyle admitted, but he didn't let go of my hand right away. "I'm a graphic designer, not exactly the type to believe in prophetic dreams or fate or any of that. But I've been seeing your face in my sleep for 3 months now, and here you are, sitting next to me on a flight to Sydney. If that's not the universe trying to tell me something, I don't know what is." The flight attendants were going through their safety demonstration, but I barely heard them. I was too focused on the way Kyle's thumb had briefly brushed across my knuckles before he released my hand, too aware of how close he was sitting, too conscious of the way my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with flying anxiety. What kind of dreams? I heard myself ask, immediately regretting the question. I didn't want to know. I couldn't handle knowing. Kyle's eyes searched my face, and I had the unsettling feeling that he could see every secret I'd been keeping, every truth I'd been avoiding. The kind that made me wake up feeling like I'd lost something important, he said quietly. The kind that made me wonder if I was losing my mind. Because how do you dream about someone you've never met? The plane began to taxi toward the runway, and I gripped the armrest, using the movement as an excuse to look away from Kyle's intense gaze. But I could still feel him watching me, could still feel the weight of his impossible claims settling between us like a challenge I wasn't ready to face. 14 hours. 14 hours sitting next to someone who claimed to have dreamed about me. Someone whose presence made every carefully constructed wall I'd built around my true self feel suddenly fragile. As the plane lifted off and Denver fell away below us, I realized I was no longer running away from my problems. I was flying straight toward the biggest one of all. The plane's engines hummed to life as Noah tried to process what had just happened. Kyle, that was his name, sat beside him with an easy confidence that made Noah's chest tighten. The stranger's claim about dreaming of his face should have sounded like a terrible pickup line, but something in Kyle's green eyes suggested he was completely serious. I know how it sounds, Kyle said, adjusting his seatbelt as the plane began to taxi. Trust me, I've been questioning my own sanity for months. But when I saw you in the boarding line, I nearly dropped my coffee. He turned slightly in his seat, and Noah caught a hint of cologne, something warm and masculine that made his pulse quicken. I'm Kyle, by the way. Kyle Morrison. Noah, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. Noah Chun. Kyle's smile was genuine, transforming his already handsome features into something that made Noah's stomach flip. It's nice to finally meet you, Noah. Even if you think I'm completely insane. I'm still deciding, Noah said, attempting lightness despite the way his heart was hammering. He'd spent years perfecting the art of casual conversation, of deflecting attention from anything too personal. But Kyle's presence seemed to strip away those carefully constructed defenses. Fair enough. Kyle pulled out his phone as the flight attendant began the safety demonstration. I'm a graphic designer. I work mostly with tech startups, some publishing houses. I was actually in Denver for a client meeting, and now I'm heading to Sydney for another project. What about you? Noah found himself studying Kyle's profile as he spoke. The strong jawline, the way his dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, the animated way he gestured with his hands. Everything about him radiated a comfort in his own skin that Noah had never experienced. Marketing consultant, Noah said automatically. I help companies rebrand, restructure their image. The irony wasn't lost on him. He spent his professional life helping others present authentic versions of themselves while living a complete lie. That's fascinating, Kyle said, and Noah could tell he meant it. So you're good at reading people, understanding what makes them tick? Something like that. Noah shifted uncomfortably. Kyle's attention felt too focused, too intense. About these dreams. Right. Kyle's expression grew more serious. I know it sounds crazy, but they started about 6 months ago. Always the same man. Your face, your build, even the way you move. Dark hair, brown eyes. This particular way of tilting your head when you're thinking. As if to demonstrate, Kyle mimicked the exact gesture Noah had made moments earlier. A chill ran down Noah's spine. That's specific. The dreams were always in different places. Sometimes we were walking through a city I didn't recognize, sometimes talking in a coffee shop. Once we were on a beach at sunset. But it was always you, and we were always. Kyle paused, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. We were always together. Like, together. Noah's mouth went dry. Together how? Like we belonged to each other, Kyle said quietly. I know how that sounds. I've never been one for mystical nonsense, but these dreams felt more real than most of my actual memories. And the strangest part? In every single one, you seemed happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way that made me want to find you in real life. The plane lifted off, and Noah gripped his armrest as they climbed into the afternoon sky. Kyle's words were creating a dangerous warmth in his chest, a longing for something he'd never allowed himself to want. Are you? Noah started, then stopped. He couldn't ask the question that was burning in his throat. Gay? Kyle finished gently. Yeah, I am. I've been out since college. My family's great about it. My friends don't care. and I've had a few serious relationships over the years. Nothing that stuck, though. I was starting to think maybe I was too picky, or maybe I'd just built up some impossible standard in my head. He looked directly at Noah. And then I started having dreams about you. Noah felt like he couldn't breathe. Kyle's openness was everything he'd never allowed himself to be. The casual way he mentioned being out, having relationships with men, living authentically, it painted a picture of a life Noah had convinced himself was impossible. What about you? Kyle asked. Are you seeing anyone? No, Noah said quickly. I'm not. I don't really date much. Work keeps me busy. Kyle nodded, but Noah caught something shift in his expression, a flicker of understanding that made Noah's defenses slam back into place. I get that, Kyle said carefully. Sometimes it's easier to focus on career stuff than deal with the complicated personal things. The way he said it suggested he understood more than Noah was comfortable with. Noah turned to look out the window at the clouds below, trying to regain his composure. So what's in Sydney for you? Kyle asked, seeming to sense Noah's need to change the subject. Just getting away, Noah said. I needed some distance from everything. Family stuff? Noah's laugh was bitter. You could say that. My parents have very specific ideas about what my life should look like. Good job, nice apartment, eventual marriage to the right kind of person. They've been introducing me to their friends' daughters for years. And that's not what you want. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Noah wasn't ready to face. Kyle's green eyes were patient, understanding, and completely non-judgmental. For a moment, Noah imagined what it would be like to tell the truth, to admit that he'd never wanted any of those things, that he'd been running from his own desires for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to want anything at all. I don't know what I want, Noah said finally, which was both a lie and the most honest thing he'd said in years. Kyle reached over and briefly touched Noah's hand where it rested on the armrest. The contact was light, barely there, but it sent electricity shooting up Noah's arm. 14 hours is a long time, Kyle said softly. Maybe by the time we land, you'll have a better idea. The conversation flows between us like we've known each other for years, not hours. Kyle tells me about his latest project, designing a brand identity for a sustainable fashion company in Melbourne, and I find myself hanging on every word, watching the way his hands move when he talks, the slight crease that appears between his eyebrows when he's thinking deeply about something. What about you? He asks, turning those impossibly green eyes on me. What's waiting for you in Sydney? I take a sip of my coffee, buying time. Work conference. Software development. Pretty boring stuff compared to what you do. I doubt that, Kyle says, and there's something in his voice that makes me look at him more carefully. You don't strike me as someone who does boring things. The way he says it sends heat through my chest. I've spent so many years perfecting the art of being unremarkable, of blending in, of never drawing attention to the parts of myself that might raise questions. But Kyle sees through it somehow, and that terrifies me. Trust me, I'm about as exciting as watching paint dry, I say, trying to deflect with humor. Kyle laughs, a rich sound that makes something flutter in my stomach. The guy who's been running from something important enough to board a 14-hour flight with barely any notice? I don't think so. My coffee cup freezes halfway to my lips. What makes you think I'm running from something? The way you packed, he says simply. I noticed when you were putting your bag in the overhead. Everything just thrown in, like you left in a hurry. And the way you keep checking your phone like you're expecting bad news, then putting it away like you're afraid of what you might find. I set my cup down carefully, trying to ignore how exposed I feel. Kyle's observational skills are unsettling, like he can see right through the walls I've spent years building. Maybe I'm just a messy packer, I say weakly. Maybe, Kyle agrees, but his tone suggests he doesn't believe it for a second. Or maybe you're like me. Like you how? Kyle is quiet for a moment, looking out the small airplane window at the endless expanse of clouds below us. When he turns back to me, there's something vulnerable in his expression. I used to run too, he says quietly. From myself, mostly. From the truth about who I was, what I wanted. It's exhausting, isn't it? Always being on guard. Always monitoring yourself to make sure you don't slip up and let something real show through. My heart starts pounding so hard I'm sure he can hear it. The way he's looking at me, the gentle understanding in his voice, it's like he knows. Like he can see straight through to the part of me I've kept locked away for so long. I don't know what you mean, I say, but even to my own ears, it sounds hollow. Kyle nods slowly, Like he expected that answer. I spent my early 20s pretending to be someone I wasn't. Dating women I had no real interest in, talking about futures I never wanted, all because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. What everyone expected. The words hit me like a physical blow. I want to look away, to change the subject, to do anything but sit here while Kyle casually dismantles every defense I've ever built. But I can't move. I can't even breathe properly. What changed? I hear myself ask, and I hate how small my voice sounds. I met someone, Kyle says, and something twists painfully in my chest. Someone who saw through all my pretending and called me on it. He didn't let me hide anymore. Are you? I start, then stop. I can't ask what I want to ask. I can't even think it clearly. Still with him? Kyle shakes his head. No, that was years ago. But he taught me something important. That living a lie, even a comfortable one, isn't really living at all. The silence stretches between us, heavy with implications I'm not ready to face. Kyle doesn't push, doesn't demand answers I'm not ready to give. He just sits there, patient and understanding, and somehow that makes it worse. My family, I say finally, the words scraping out of my throat. They have very specific ideas about what my life should look like. Most families do, Kyle says gently. Traditional values. Traditional expectations. They've already got my whole future mapped out. The right job, the right neighborhood, the right. I can't finish the sentence. The right wife? Kyle supplies quietly. I close my eyes, feeling like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. Yeah, and what do you want, Noah? The question hangs in the air between us, simple and impossible. What do I want? I've spent so many years not allowing myself to want anything that the question feels foreign, dangerous. I start, then stop. I look at Kyle, at his kind eyes and patient expression, at the way he's sitting slightly turned toward me like I'm the only person in the world who matters right now. I want to stop being afraid all the time. Afraid of what? Of being seen. Really seen. Of someone figuring out that I'm not who I pretend to be. Kyle reaches over and touches my hand where it's resting on the armrest between us. The contact is brief, just a gentle brush of his fingers, but it sends electricity shooting up my arm. What if being seen isn't as scary as you think, he asks. What if the person you really are is someone worth knowing? I stare down at my hand where he touched it, still feeling the warmth of his skin. You don't understand. If my family knew, if my coworkers knew, if anyone knew. Knew what, Noah? The question is so gentle, so full of understanding, that for a moment I almost answer. Almost let the truth spill out of me right here at 30,000 feet, trapped in this metal tube with nowhere to run. But the fear is too strong, too deeply ingrained. It doesn't matter, I say instead, pulling my hand away. Some things are better left buried. Kyle studies my face for a long moment, and I can see him processing what I'm not saying, connecting dots I'm not ready to have connected. You know, he says finally, in my dreams about you, you seemed happy. Really, genuinely happy. Like you'd finally stopped running from something important. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Kyle, please don't. Don't what? Don't make this into something it's not. Don't read meaning into coincidences. Don't. I struggle for words, feeling panic rising in my chest. Don't make me hope for things that can't happen. Kyle is quiet for a moment, then nods slowly. Okay, I'm sorry if I push too hard. But the damage is done. The seed of possibility he's planted is already taking root, and I can feel it growing despite my desperate attempts to kill it. The image of myself happy, truly happy, free from the constant weight of pretending. It's more tempting than anything I've ever imagined. Tell me about your dreams, I say before I can stop myself. Kyle's eyes widen slightly, like he wasn't expecting that. Are you sure? I nod, even though I'm not sure of anything anymore. They're always different, but always the same. If that makes sense, Kyle says carefully. Different settings, different situations, but always the same feeling. Like coming home. Like finding something I didn't even know I was looking for. What kind of situations? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Kyle hesitates. Quiet ones mostly. Cooking dinner together. Walking through a bookstore. Sitting on a couch watching movies. Normal, everyday things, but they felt significant. Like they mattered in a way that nothing else did. The picture he's painting is so vivid, so appealing, that I can almost see it myself. A life where I don't have to hide. Where I can just be myself without fear or shame. It's everything I've never allowed myself to want. That sounds nice, I manage. It was, Kyle says. In the dreams, you weren't afraid. You were just yourself. Whoever that is. I look at him, this beautiful, confident man who somehow dreamed me into existence, who sees possibilities I'm too terrified to acknowledge. For just a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to be the person from his dreams. To be free. Then reality crashes back, and I remember all the reasons why that can never happen. The plane shuddered violently, and Noah's stomach dropped as the aircraft pitched to one side. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, calm but serious. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some moderate turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Noah's knuckles went white as he gripped the armrest, his breathing shallow and quick. He'd never been a good flyer, but this felt different, more intense, more unpredictable. The plane bucked again, and he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to steady himself. Then he felt it, warm fingers sliding over his, gentle but firm. Kyle's hand covered his completely, thumb stroking across Noah's knuckles in a soothing rhythm. Hey, Kyle's voice was soft, close to his ear. It's okay. Just turbulence. We're safe. Noah's eyes snapped open, and he stared down at their joined hands. Kyle's skin was warm, slightly rough from his design work, and the contact sent electricity shooting up Noah's arm. He should pull away. He should make some excuse about personal space or being fine on his own. Instead, he found himself turning his hand palm up, letting Kyle's fingers intertwine with his. Better? Kyle asked, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. Noah nodded, not trusting his voice. The turbulence continued, but he barely noticed it now. All his attention was focused on the point where their skin touched, the way Kyle's thumb continued its gentle circles, the way this simple contact felt more intimate than anything he'd ever experienced. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, Noah couldn't tell. The plane finally steadied, but Kyle didn't let go. Neither did Noah. Noah. Kyle's voice was different now, more serious. Can I ask you something? Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. Sure. Are you okay? I mean really okay? Because you've seemed. Kyle paused, choosing his words carefully. You've seemed like you're carrying something heavy. And I know we just met, but I feel like I know you somehow. Like I've been waiting to meet you. Noah's throat tightened. He looked down at their still joined hands, then back up into Kyle's concerned eyes. Those dreams Kyle had mentioned, they felt less crazy now, less impossible. Maybe Kyle really had been waiting for him. Maybe they both had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Noah started, then stopped. How could he explain 28 years of hiding, of pretending, of building a life around what everyone else expected him to be? I'm not really okay, no. Kyle's grip tightened slightly, encouraging. What's going on? The words sat in Noah's throat like stones. He'd never said them out loud, never even let himself think them clearly. But something about Kyle's presence, the way he listened without judgment, made Noah feel like maybe, just maybe, he could be honest. My family, Noah began, then shook his head. No, that's not fair. It's not just them. It's me. I've been. He took a shaky breath. I've been lying to everyone. To them, to myself. About who I am. Kyle waited, patient and steady. They have these expectations, Noah continued, his voice getting stronger. Traditional family, you know? Marriage, kids, the whole picture. And I've been trying so hard to fit into that picture, to be what they want me to be. But I can't. I've never been able to. What do you want to be? Kyle asked quietly. Noah's breath caught. The question was so simple, but it cut right to the heart of everything he'd been running from. I want to be. He looked into Kyle's eyes, seeing nothing but acceptance there. I want to be someone who doesn't have to pretend. Someone who can be honest about what he wants, who he's attracted to. Kyle's expression didn't change, but Noah felt something shift between them, a recognition, an understanding. I've never, Noah whispered, his voice breaking slightly. I've never let myself want what I actually want. I've spent years convincing myself that what I feel isn't real, that it's just confusion or loneliness or anything except what it actually is. And what is it? Kyle's voice was so gentle, so patient. Noah felt tears prick at his eyes. I'm attracted to men. I always have been. But I've been so terrified of what that means, of how it would change everything, that I've just buried it. Thrown myself into work, avoided relationships, told myself I was just focused on my career. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Noah felt like he might shatter from the weight of finally saying it out loud. Kyle's free hand came up to cup Noah's cheek, thumb brushing away a tear Noah didn't realize had fallen. "Thank you for telling me. I've never said that to anyone," Noah admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I've never even really admitted it to myself." "How does it feel, saying it?" Noah considered the question, surprised by the answer. "Terrifying, but also relieving. Like I can finally breathe properly." Kyle smiled, and Noah felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "I had a feeling," Kyle said softly. "The way you looked at me when I sat down, the way you've been fighting yourself all afternoon. I recognized it because I used to do the same thing. You did. For years. I convinced myself I was just different, that I hadn't met the right woman yet. It took meeting someone who saw right through my bullshit to help me accept who I really was." Noah felt a pang of something. Jealousy? Curiosity? Someone important? "My first boyfriend. He was patient with me, helped me understand that being gay wasn't something to be ashamed of. We didn't work out long term, but I'll always be grateful to him for helping me find myself." Noah absorbed this, trying to imagine what that kind of acceptance might feel like. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be honest about who I am. I've been hiding for so long." "You don't have to figure it all out right now," Kyle said, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns on Noah's hand. "But you've already taken the hardest step. You've admitted the truth to yourself and to me." Noah looked down at their joined hands again, marveling at how natural it felt. "This is crazy," he said, but without any real conviction. "I don't even know you." "Maybe not," Kyle agreed. "But I feel like I do. And those dreams I told you about? They weren't just about your face, Noah. They were about us, together. Happy. Like we belonged together." Noah's heart raced. "What kind of dreams?" Kyle's cheeks flushed slightly. "Intimate ones. Not just physical, but emotional. Us talking like this, understanding each other. Us building something real together. I know it sounds insane, but they felt more real than most of my actual memories." "That's impossible," Noah said, but even as he said it, he felt the truth of it resonating in his chest. This connection, this understanding, it did feel like something he'd been dreaming about without knowing it. "Maybe," Kyle said, "but here we are." Noah stared into Kyle's eyes, seeing his own wonder reflected there. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of everything. Of my family's reaction, of changing my whole life, of not knowing how to be gay, of—" Noah swallowed hard. "Of how much I want this. Want you. I've never wanted anything this much, and it terrifies me." Kyle's expression grew tender. "You don't have to want me, Noah, but you do have to want yourself. You have to want to be honest about who you are." "I do," Noah said, the words coming out stronger than he expected. "I do want that. I'm tired of pretending, tired of running. I want to be real." "Then be real," Kyle said simply. "Right here, right now, with me." Noah felt something shift inside him, like a door opening that had been locked for years. "I'm gay," he said, testing the words. "I'm gay, and I'm attracted to you, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I don't want to pretend anymore." Kyle's smile was radiant. "There you are," he said softly. "The real you." Noah felt tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of frustration or fear. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally coming home to himself. "I don't know what happens next," Noah said. "We don't have to know," Kyle replied. "We just have to be honest about what we want." Noah looked at Kyle, really looked at him, and felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel before. Hope. Hope that maybe he could have this, could have someone who saw him and accepted him completely. Hope that maybe Kyle's dreams weren't just dreams, but a glimpse of what was possible. "I want to try," Noah said, his voice steady for the first time all day. "I want to see what this could be." Kyle squeezed his hand. "So do I." The plane continued its journey across the ocean, carrying them both toward an uncertain but suddenly bright future. The silence between us stretched for what felt like an eternity after I'd finally spoken those words aloud, words I'd never said to another human being. The plane's engines hummed steadily around us, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Kyle's hand was still holding mine, his thumb tracing gentle circles across my knuckles, and somehow that simple touch anchored me to this moment of terrifying honesty. "Thank you," Kyle said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made me look up at him. "Thank you for trusting me with that." I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I've never said it before. To anyone. Not even to myself. Really. Not out loud. How does it feel? He asked, and there was something in his tone. Not pity, not judgment, just genuine curiosity and care. I considered the question seriously, taking inventory of the emotions swirling through me. Terrifying, I admitted. But also lighter? Like I've been carrying this enormous weight for so long that I forgot what it felt like to breathe properly. Kyle squeezed my hand gently. I remember that feeling. The first time I said it out loud, I was 19 and completely panicked. I'd been denying it for years, throwing myself into sports and dating girls I felt nothing for, trying to convince myself and everyone else that I was something I wasn't. What changed? I asked, desperate to understand how someone moves from where I was to where Kyle seemed to be. So comfortable, so at peace with himself. I met someone, Kyle said, his eyes growing distant with memory. His name was Marcus. He was a few years older, already out, already comfortable with who he was. We were in the same art class in college, and he just saw through all my pretending. He didn't push, didn't try to force anything, but he was patient with me while I figured things out. Were you together long? I found myself asking, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know about Kyle's past relationships. 2 years, Kyle said with a small smile. He was exactly what I needed at that time in my life. Someone who helped me understand that being gay wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was just part of who I was, like having brown eyes or being left-handed. When we eventually broke up, it was amicable. We just grew in different directions, but I'll always be grateful to him for helping me find myself. I nodded, trying to imagine what it would be like to have that kind of support, that kind of understanding. I don't think I've ever had anyone in my life who would react that way. My family. I trailed off, not sure how to explain the weight of their expectations. Tell me about them, Kyle said gently. I leaned back in my seat, suddenly feeling exhausted by the emotional intensity of the past hour. My parents are good people, but they're traditional. Very traditional. They've had my life planned out since I was born. Good grades, good job, marry a nice girl, give them grandchildren. My dad's always talking about carrying on the family name, about legacy. My mom's constantly asking when I'm going to bring home a girlfriend, when I'm going to settle down. And you've been trying to live up to those expectations? I've been trying to disappear into them, I corrected. Work became my excuse for everything. Too busy for dating, too focused on my career to think about relationships. I convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe the other stuff would fall into place somehow. Kyle was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing what I'd shared. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Yeah. When you look ahead, when you imagine your life continuing the way it has been, hiding, pretending, living for other people's expectations, how does that feel? The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on the fear of change, on the terror of disappointing people, that I hadn't really considered the alternative. Empty, I said quietly, like I'm watching someone else's life happen to me. And when you imagine being honest, living authentically, I thought about it, really thought about it. Scary as hell, I admitted, but also alive. Like I might actually get to experience my own life instead of just surviving it. Kyle nodded slowly. The fear doesn't go away completely, you know? Even now, even years later, there are still moments when I wish things were simpler. But Noah, the alternative, living a lie for the rest of your life, that's not really living at all. I know, I said, and I meant it. I think I've known for a long time, but I've been too scared to admit it. What scares you most about it? I considered the question, trying to untangle the web of fears that had kept me trapped for so long. Losing my family, I said finally. They're not bad people, but they have very specific ideas about what's right and wrong. I don't know if they could accept this part of me. And if they can't, the question hung in the air between us, and I realized it was the one I'd been avoiding for years. Then I guess I'll have to decide what's more important, their approval or my happiness. That's a hard choice, Kyle said softly. It is. But sitting here with you, having this conversation, being honest for the first time in my life, I think I'm starting to understand that it's not really a choice at all. I can't keep living for other people's expectations. It's killing me slowly. Kyle's expression softened, and he brought our joined hands up to rest against his chest. You're braver than you think you are, Noah. It takes incredible courage to even acknowledge these feelings, let alone act on them. I don't feel brave, I said. I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff without knowing if there's anything to catch me. Maybe that's what courage is, Kyle said. Jumping anyway, even when you're scared. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted inside me. This man who'd been a stranger 12 hours ago, who'd approached me with an impossible story about dreams, had somehow become the first person I'd ever trusted with my truth. And he'd handled it with such grace, such understanding, that I felt something I'd never experienced before, the possibility of being truly known and accepted. Kyle, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I'm glad you sat next to me today. I'm glad you told me about your dreams, even though it sounded crazy. I'm glad you saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. I'm glad too. And Noah, this is just the beginning. You don't have to figure everything out right now. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to take the next step, whatever that looks like for you. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of hope, of something that felt dangerously close to joy. For the first time in my life, I could imagine a future where I wasn't pretending, where I wasn't hiding, where I might actually be happy. What does the next step look like? I asked. Kyle's smile widened. I think that depends on what you want it to look like. The silence between us stretched for what felt like an eternity, filled only by the steady hum of the airplane engines. Kyle's hand was still resting gently on mine, and I could feel the warmth of his skin anchoring me to this moment, to this truth I'd finally spoken aloud. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it over the ambient noise of the cabin. Noah, Kyle said softly, his voice carrying something I couldn't quite identify. I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't sound completely insane. I turned to face him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes that mirrored my own. After everything we've shared today, I think we're past worrying about sounding insane. He smiled at that, but there was something deeper in his expression, something that made my breath catch. Those dreams I told you about, they weren't just random images of your face. They were intimate, emotional. We were together, Noah, really together. And in every single one, you looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. The words hit me like a physical force. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, and my pulse quickened. Kyle, I know how it sounds, he continued, his thumb gently stroking across my knuckles. But sitting here with you, learning who you are, feeling this connection, it's exactly what I dreamed. Not just the physical attraction, though God knows that's there, but the way you make me feel seen. Understood. The way you're brave enough to be vulnerable with me. I stared at him, processing his words. The impossibility of it all should have made me skeptical, but instead, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I've never felt anything like this before, I whispered. Not with anyone. I used to think there was something wrong with me, that I was broken somehow because I couldn't feel for women what I was supposed to feel. But this, with you, it's like I'm finally awake. Kyle's eyes softened, and he brought his other hand up to cup my face gently. There's nothing wrong with you, Noah. You're perfect exactly as you are. And what you're feeling, it's real, it's valid, and it's yours to claim. The tenderness in his touch, the acceptance in his voice, broke something open inside me. Tears I'd been holding back for years finally spilled over. I'm terrified, I admitted. Not of you, not of this, but of everything that comes after. My family, my job, my entire life, everything will change. It doesn't have to change all at once, Kyle said, his voice steady and reassuring. And you don't have to do it alone. I meant what I said about being patient, about being here for you. This thing between us, whatever it is, it's worth exploring. You're worth it. I leaned into his touch, feeling safer than I had in years. I keep thinking about what you said about Marcus, about how he helped you find yourself. I never thought I'd have that. Someone who could understand what this feels like. You do now, Kyle said simply. And Noah, I need you to know something else. What I'm feeling for you, it's not just about helping you through this journey. It's not pity or some savior complex. I'm falling for you. Hard. And I know that's crazy to say after knowing you for less than a day, but it's not crazy. I interrupted, my voice stronger than I expected. Because I'm falling for you too. I've been fighting it since the moment you sat down next to me, telling myself it was impossible, that I was imagining things. But Kyle, when you touch me, when you look at me like that, I feel like I can finally breathe. The intensity in his eyes deepened, and I saw him swallow hard. Noah, I want to kiss you right now so badly it's actually painful. But I also want to make sure you're ready for that. That you want it too. My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked at him. This beautiful, patient man who had somehow found me in the middle of my hiding. I've never kissed a man before, I admitted quietly. I've never let myself want to. But I want to kiss you, Kyle. I want it more than I've ever wanted anything. He smiled then, soft and radiant, and slowly leaned closer. Then let's not overthink it. He murmured against my lips before closing the distance between us. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, giving me space to pull away if I needed to. But the moment our lips met, something ignited inside me. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd been denying myself. The rightness of it, the way my body responded instinctively to his touch, the way my heart seemed to expand in my chest. It was everything I'd never allowed myself to imagine. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing a little unsteadily, I rested my forehead against his. I started, then laughed softly. I don't have words for what that was. Perfect, Kyle supplied, his hand still cradling my face. It was perfect. You're perfect. I closed my eyes, letting myself exist in this moment, in this bubble of acceptance and possibility. What happens when we land? I asked, the practical part of my mind finally catching up. You live in Portland, I live in Denver. This whole thing could just be a beautiful moment that ends when we get off this plane. Kyle was quiet for a moment, and I felt him considering his words carefully. It could be, he said finally. But it doesn't have to be. We have phones, we have video calls, we have weekends and vacation days. If you want to see where this goes, if you want to try building something real together, then we figure it out. One day at a time. The hope in his voice matched the hope blooming in my chest. I want that, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. I want to try. I want to see who I can be when I'm not hiding anymore. And I want to explore this thing between us, whatever it becomes. Kyle's smile was radiant. Then that's what we'll do. We'll take it slow, we'll be patient with each other, and we'll see where this incredible connection takes us. As if on cue, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing our descent into Sydney. I looked out the window at the lights of the city below, feeling like I was seeing the world with new eyes. Everything looked different now, full of possibility instead of fear. Ready for the next chapter? Kyle asked, squeezing my hand. I squeezed back, feeling more ready than I'd ever been for anything. With you? I'm ready for whatever comes next. The plane's wheels touched down in Sydney with a gentle thud that seemed to echo through my chest. I watched through the small window as we taxied toward the terminal, the city lights stretching out like scattered diamonds against the darkness. Kyle's hand was still intertwined with mine, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm, and I realized that in just 14 hours, my entire world had shifted on its axis. So this is it, Kyle said softly, his voice carrying a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Back to reality. I turned to face him, taking in the way the cabin lights caught the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Is it though? Reality, I mean. I squeezed his hand. Because this feels more real than anything I've ever experienced. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and passengers began gathering their belongings around us. Neither of us moved. It felt like stepping into that aisle would break whatever spell had been cast over us during this flight, like we'd returned to being strangers who'd shared an impossible conversation. I need to tell you something, Kyle said, reaching into his carry-on bag. He pulled out a small sketchbook, its pages worn from use. Remember when I told you about the dreams? About seeing your face? I nodded, my heart already racing. He flipped through several pages before stopping on one. I've been drawing you for months, Noah. Every time I woke up from one of those dreams, I'd sketch what I remembered. He turned the book toward me. The breath caught in my throat. There, in careful pencil strokes, was my face. Not just once, but dozens of times across the page. My eyes, my smile, the way my hair fell across my forehead. Some sketches showed me laughing, others serious, a few with an expression of longing that made my chest tight. Kyle, I whispered, touching the edge of the page. This is crazy, I know. But Noah, look at this one. He pointed to a sketch in the corner. It showed two figures, their faces close together, foreheads touching. I drew this 3 weeks ago. I didn't understand it then, but now. Now I could see it was us. The way we'd been sitting just hours ago, lost in conversation. our faces inches apart, the way we'd looked at each other before our first kiss. "How is this possible?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the sounds of passengers deplaning around us. "I don't know," he admitted, closing the sketchbook. "But I stopped questioning it the moment you sat down next to me. Some things don't need explanations, do they?" I looked around at the nearly empty cabin, then back at Kyle. "We should probably get off this plane." He smiled, that same easy grin that had disarmed me from the moment we'd met. "Probably. But first, I need your number. And not just because I've been dreaming about you for 6 months." I laughed, pulling out my phone. "Because why?" "Because in the last 14 hours, I've fallen for the man behind the face in my dreams. The real Noah, not just the one my subconscious conjured up." He paused, his expression growing serious. "The brave Noah who just came out to a stranger on an airplane. The Noah who's about to change his entire life." We exchanged numbers, and I felt a flutter of panic mixed with excitement. This was really happening. I was really doing this. As we finally gathered our bags and made our way off the plane, Kyle asked, "What happens now? I mean, I live in Portland, you're in Denver." "I don't know," I admitted, shouldering my carry-on. "I've never done this before. Any of this. But Kyle, I can't go back to pretending. Not after tonight." We walked through the terminal together, our pace deliberately slow. Neither of us wanted this to end. "I have a layover here for 3 hours," Kyle said as we approached the customs area. "My flight to Portland doesn't leave until morning." "I'm staying in Sydney for a week," I said, my heart pounding. "Work conference." He stopped walking and turned to face me fully. "Noah, I know this is moving fast, and I know you have a lot to figure out with your family and everything, but—" He took a deep breath. "Would you maybe want to have breakfast tomorrow? Before I fly out?" I thought about my family back in Denver, about the phone call I'd have to make, about the conversation that would either free me or cost me everything. Then I looked at Kyle, at this man who'd somehow found me in his dreams and helped me find myself in reality. "Yes," I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "I'd like that very much." We exchanged one more kiss before going our separate ways through customs, and I felt something I'd never experienced before, the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being completely, authentically myself. 3 hours later, sitting in my hotel room overlooking Sydney Harbor, I stared at my phone for a long time before finally dialing my parents' number. When my mother answered, her voice thick with sleep, I took a deep breath. "Mom, it's Noah. I know it's late there, but I need to tell you something important. Something I should have told you years ago." As I began to speak, I thought about Kyle's sketchbook, about dreams that somehow became reality, about the courage it takes to live an authentic life. And for the first time in 28 years, I told my truth.